Backstage Velvet borrowed hearts. I restore old sound for a living. Not recordings, rooms, auditoriums, concert halls, theaters with balconies that droop like tired eyelids until you coax them awake. You learn to hear where a building is lying, where a note dies in plaster or a whisper blooms too loudly. I walk into empty spaces and clap once. The echo writes me a letter, and I spend months replying with wood and wool. The Oralia was my biggest letter yet. A century-old theater sleeping under tarps and scaffolding, its chandelier boxed like a heart in transit. I was there the night the carpenters swore they heard strings when nobody was playing. The afternoon pigeons decided to attend rehearsal. The morning a shaft of dusty light hit the proscenium so perfectly I had to laugh and pretend it was at a joke I told myself. The city had fought over this place for years. Some wanted condos, some wanted ghosts. I got a contract and a key. My wife, Mara, loved the lobby before she loved me. She's a publicist who makes famous things look inevitable. "We could throw a gala here," she said the first time I showed her around, heels clicking like applause. She kissed me under the box chandelier, coconut lotion and coffee on her breath, and promised to bring the people who make rooms important. I believed her. Belief is just sound we're not done measuring yet. When you work in an old theater, the air makes suggestions. So did a violinist named Tamsin who practiced at odd hours because she hated being overheard. She was part of the orchestra contracted for our opening week, which meant she belonged to the future while I was still translating the past. I heard her before I saw her, a high, careful line searching for a place to land. I followed it to the stage where she stood in a pool of ghost light, bow lifted like a question mark. "Don't mind me," I said, hands raised. "Acoustics don't care about property lines." "Nor do violins," she said, not stopping. She played a phrase, then another, and frowned like someone tasting a soup that almost remembered itself. "There's a hiccup upstage left," she added, "like a cough in a library." I went up there and listened. She was right. I could feel the pocket of dead air, a place where sound forgot to walk. "We'll fix it," I told her, and she smiled without letting her mouth go too far, the smile of someone used to applause from people who don't love her. We talked in the way two tradespeople do when admiration is a tool. She asked how I chose wood. I asked how she chose rosin. She told me about a teacher who said the bow hand is a confession. I told her about a professor who made us sing our blueprints. When she put the violin away, she ran a hand through her hair like she was telling herself the day would be gentle if she insisted hard enough. The hiccup took 2 weeks and a stubbornness I usually reserve for people who think velvet is soundproofing. I built a hidden diffuser out of maple and apology, stitched it into the wall where nobody would notice unless they were looking for kindness. When I clapped, the echo wrote back correctly. When Tamsin tried her phrase again, the violin stopped shivering. "That," she said, bow lowering, "feels like being believed." "You will be," I said, and felt a word show up in my mouth that had no business living there. "We." Mara started using the Oralia as if the deed had a signature only she could read. She knew which reporters would swoon for history, and which ones needed a photograph with someone whose shoes were hard to get. Her phone lived a second life as a hummingbird, always somewhere I couldn't catch. She'd stop by my work table, along with a film crew or a florist, and leave behind the fizz of perfume and decisions. We'd always been good at being busy near each other. It was intimacy's understudy, charming and capable until the star finally shows up and you remember what the show was supposed to be. Lately, though, the understudy had been getting all the lines. Mara said it was the season, a rush, a runway. I told her I was excited, which was true and not sufficient. The clue arrived stupidly, as they often do, An email on our shared tablet flashed while I was using it to order acoustic panels. The subject line was hilariously boring, RE, seating flow. The sender was Noah Hale, an investor whose name moved conversations forward. The message was short. Same plan tonight, side door on Ninth. Loved the tour. I stared at it while the tablet waited politely. Side door on Ninth was the stage door, the one I treated like a back entrance to a church. Tour could have meant anything. It could have meant exactly what it meant. I stood at the stage door that night with a level clamped under my arm to pretend I was in the middle of measuring something. The alley smelled like rain and electricity. At 7:30, Noah arrived dressed as a decision, hair so crisp it probably had an assistant. He texted. The door opened, and Mara slipped out the way dresses slip off people who are certain they're wanted, brisk, pleased, conspiratorial. They didn't kiss. They did something worse. They shared a look that suggested the city had agreed to be kind to them. I found a reason to be at the fly rail 30 minutes later because I hated myself enough to want evidence. The old grid bounces sound like gossip. Their voices drifted up easily, wrapped in velvet and against my will. I'm starting to think we'll never have a moment, Noah said. Opening week, then the afters, then more afters. Mara's laugh had always been a living room to me, warm, full, a place where friends sat on the floor even though there was a couch. Tonight it had a door I wasn't invited through. Patience is good for me, she said, and I could hear her touching his tie because fabric makes a sound when fingers think they own it. I'm better when I wait. I didn't drop anything. I didn't storm down, throw the level, say the names people say when they want to feel like they've noticed the end in time. I stood with my fingers pressed to a beam that had been holding up other people's performances for a century, and remembered that my job was to make rooms honest. I swallowed the taste of sawdust and humiliation. I went home to an apartment that seemed to have borrowed its furniture from someplace less hopeful. The next morning, Tamsin practiced on stage with a line between her eyebrows. I sat in the fifth row, pretending to check reverberation times and actually checking whether a person I barely knew could tell I was not fine. Between phrases, she lowered her violin and looked at me the way doctors do when they know the results and want you to ask. You play like you're trying not to be overheard, I said. You watch like you're pretending to be an empty seat, she answered. I almost told her. I didn't. I asked if she wanted coffee. She did. We drank it leaning against the stage lip, paper cups warming our hands while we stared at the chandelier crate the way sailors look at far-off lights, hope spiced with superstition. Violins are jealous creatures, she said. They hate rooms that pretend not to care. This one cared and then forgot. I'll remind it, I said. And who reminds you? She asked, so gently I wanted to be a different person. That night my marriage let out a sound I'd heard in buildings I couldn't save, a small, definitive crack. I asked Mara if we were okay. She said of course, and then told me she'd be sleeping at the studio because of a dawn shoot. I asked her if she was seeing someone. She said I was being insecure then. This was the masterpiece, kissed my forehead, and told me she admired my sensitivity. I'm not righteous. I'm an engineer of echoes, so I did what engineers do. I designed a test. The gala would be 2 nights before opening, a velvet parade of donors and gowns that require choreography. I had control over lighting cues, speeches, microphones, the little moment when the chandelier would unbox itself theatrically and rise, glowing, to claim its throne again. I created a new cue. During Mara's welcome remarks, the stage would flood with warm amber and a soft wash of strings. It would be a triumph. If she had to speak to 1,000 people while wanting someone else, the room would tell me. Rooms always tell. I also wrote a different script for myself. Not revenge, precision. I invited Noah personally, signed the card with both our names, included a handwritten note about side doors being for deliveries only. I gave Tamsin a seat in the second row, aisle, and told her selfishly that I liked having her in my sightlines. She tilted her head and said nothing, and let me keep the fiction that she didn't guess anything more than that. Gala night dressed up in every way. The Oralia smelled like wood warmed to kindness and perfume that would later be forgotten in cabs. I stood in the wings with a headset, a cue stack, and a chest that felt like a faulty drum. Mara stepped into the microphone's circle with an ease I'd fallen in love with once. She thanked the city, the donors, the artisans who had coaxed paint to lie beautifully. She didn't look for me, which, reader, I noticed. "Tonight is about homecoming," she said, "about giving a room its voice back." My finger hovered over the cue. I could have let her have the wash and the strings. I could have chosen grace. Instead, I pressed and gave her the truth. The light rose slow as sunrise, and the hidden diffuser unfurled the sound of one violin practicing a question. Tamsin's phrase recorded the week we fixed the hiccup, the sound of a room choosing to be brave. Mara's face shifted. Not guilt, calculation. For a second she looked at Noah, seated where the cameras could find him, and their eyes did the arithmetic of a future I had not been invited to. The chandelier lifted, audience gasped, and I felt that small, definitive crack widen into a decision. After the speeches, after the applause found the rafters where I had waited angrily and made friends with dust, I went to the lobby where the donors were ignoring their diets and praising the caterer. Noah buttonholed me, all smiles and teeth. "Masterful," he said, pulling me into a hug he did not earn. "You must be very proud." "I am," I said. "Of the building, of the team, of my wife's ability to make people love a thing." "And you," he asked, as if we were conspirators, "do you love it?" "Enough to keep the side door locked," I said, and watched understanding arrive like weather. He blanched gracefully and went in search of a drink he could blame. Mara found me later in the green room with her heels in her hand, and a look on her face that used to precede apologies for small things, like a calendar mix-up or forgetting to buy milk. She closed the door softly and stood as if the floor hadn't decided to tilt. "You changed the cue," she said. "I gave the room its voice," I said, "and mine." She sat, legs folded under her like the girl I once helped carry a mattress up 5 flights. For a moment we were that simple again. Then she breathed in and told the truth as if someone else had dared her to do it. "I like how he looks at me," she said, "like I'm the finish line." "I liked how you looked at me when we were both still running," I said, and surprised us both by smiling. We didn't fight. We arranged the aftermath. She would move to a sublet near the park. I would keep the plants because plants forgive me. We would call our mothers separately. We agreed, with the kind of tenderness that should be mandatory, that love doesn't vanish so much as change departments. I took her hand, kissed her knuckles in the oldest ceremony I know, and we let the chandelier be the only thing in the room that insisted on shining. After everyone left, the Oralia exhaled. I stood center stage and clapped once, and the echo came back like a friend who knows where you hide the spare key. Tamsin walked out of the wings, violin case in one hand, the other already rising in greeting. "I thought you'd be here," she said. "I live here now," I said, which felt more true than anything I'd offered a census taker. She stepped close enough that I could see a fleck of rosin on her sleeve. "I don't gloat," she said softly, "but that light cue was honest." "My worst and best habit," I said. She set the case down and, hesitating just enough to be kind, touched my jaw with her fingers. The contact was perfectly YouTube-friendly. No choreography for sensors, just the electricity of skin letting another skin know it had been thinking about this. I closed my eyes. She kissed me. A careful press, a promise written in pencil first, a taste of champagne and quiet laughter. My hands found her waist and rested on the fabric of her dress, feeling the shape of a person whose job is to draw lines of air and make them feel like faith. We broke apart because restraint is also a music. She smiled, and the room sighed, and someplace inside me a small dog with tired eyes finally lay down to sleep. Opening night arrived like the world had remembered a promise. The orchestra was an organism. Tamsin was the listening heart inside it. I took my place in the wings and watched light behave. When the applause rose, it went to the rafters and knocked politely on the places that used to hide dust. I looked at the empty seat where my marriage would have sat and didn't fill it with ghosts. After in the lobby, Tamsin found me with her case again, curls rebelling against pins. We stood in a corner where a mural of nymphs pretended to be uninterested. She slid her hand into mine the way a bow settles on a string, like it was always going to. The city outside practiced its breathing. The chandelier leaned into its grin. I hear rooms for a living, I told her. I want to hear you. That, she said, squeezing my hand, is how belief sounds. We left by the front door. I locked the side entrance because some keys deserve to be retired and some doors, finally, know which way to open.